you. Pleasure to be here. Pleasure to be here. I want to make sure the film's all right. Well, I just wanted to say thank you so much for inviting me to attend your meeting. I live in Florida, actually. I don't live in California. But I was invited to speak during the California GOP convention because, as some of you saw a few months ago, I blew the whistle on your rhino-controlled California GOP trying to change the rules to steal the nomination from President Trump, because California, even though you guys live in a bastion of communism, right, and you guys have some of the most distasteful communist Democrat politicians leading your state, you actually play a very pivotal role in deciding who the GOP nominee is, because California has the highest number of GOP delegates out of any state in the entire country. And so, long story short, they tried changing the rules that would have given a participation trophy, in other words, upwards of 50 to 60 of the delegates that would have gone to the winner-take-all, that would have gone to the second place individual. So in this case, according to national polling, that would have been somebody like Ron DeSanctimonious, the absentee governor of my state of Florida, who has decided to, any DeSantis fans in the house? Or are we all Trump people here? We are Trump people, right? We are Trump. That's why we're having our own dinner. That's why we're not a part of the California GOP. So I guess they're going to have to find their own grift for this month. So take that to Jessica Patterson. You know, the last time I was in California, I was in a pair of handcuffs, believe it or not. I found myself getting arrested on the front lawn of the California governor's mansion during the last government shutdown. I was waiting today to see if these spineless cowards in the GOP were going to have what it actually took to shut our government down for the sake of saying, no, we are not going to be sending billions more dollars of our taxpayer money to fund a war in Ukraine. But as always, the Republicans caved. The Republicans caved, and that's something that we have become all too familiar with in our country, right? It's people like us, it's the activists, it's the grassroots who are often frowned upon and looked down upon by the party officials, right? People like Jessica Patterson and Kevin McCarthy, and it's important to name these people, right? Because they're a problem. And we are not going to defeat the Democrats in this country until we defeat the Republicans and the Uniparty that are working hand in hand with the Democrats to obstruct progress. And that's why we're all here, right? I mean, look, we're entertaining this ridiculous, stupid primary when President Trump is now upwards of 60 points ahead of every other GOP candidate. It's absolutely disgraceful that state parties like the California GOP and people like Ronna Romney at the RNC are actually entertaining events like we just saw today and yesterday at the California GOP convention, where, you know, they invite Ron DeSantis to come be their dinner speaker, and Vivek Ramaswamy. And yeah, look, we live in a country, everybody has a right to run for office, but we are losing our country. A lot of you are a lot older than I am. I'm 30. But at the same time, I can say that this is the most important election of my lifetime. It really is. I truly believe, as a 30-year-old woman in America, that our country is over if President Trump doesn't win in 2024. I really think it's the end of America. Our country is 247 years old, and most empires die and they completely fall and crumble at 250 years old. We are right there. And I think that we are going to witness the death and the end of the American empire if we don't do everything in our power to get President Trump back into the White House. We all watched in 2020, right? I was a candidate for Congress in President Trump's home district in Florida when we saw the election get stolen. And along with all of you on election night, right, I was watching with excitement as President Trump was leading Joe Biden, and then all of a sudden, right, became very concerned as I went to bed and stayed up and watched what was happening, and then it was 5 o'clock in the morning, and then it was 6 o'clock in the morning, and then, you know, this cloud of darkness just took over our country. And despite his successes and overwhelming support, the members of the DC political class, they worked hand in hand together in order to ensure that President Trump was removed from office in probably the greatest crime I've ever witnessed in my entire lifetime, and that was the election heist of 2020. And unlike the RNC and unlike officials at the California GOP, it's people like us and over 70% of Americans in this country, according to CNN's own poll, we're not afraid to admit the obvious, that the election was stolen, right? But yet we see that to this day, the RNC has refused to issue a statement. They refuse to actually say the obvious, that there's election fraud in this country. I mean, a lot of it really took place here in California. You have the big tech social media companies, all of them in Silicon Valley. And so California really is playing a driving force, whether it be in selecting the next GOP nominee for president or whether it be the election heist of 2020. We saw that the FBI was having weekly meetings and then daily meetings leading up to the election of 2020 with executives from Facebook and Twitter. And so it's important, right? And the theme of my speech today and what I wanted to talk to all of you about is how we can no longer wait for the Republican Party, whether it's people like Ron Romney or state officials in our own state GOPs, right? We're dealing with the same problems you are in Florida, believe it or not, which they like to tout as a red state. It's really not. We have to take action into our own hands because these people in the Republican Party are not coming to save us. They're not coming to implement election integrity measures. They've done nothing, right? Since the 2020 election, no lawsuits have been filed to combat voter fraud. Nothing has been done to actually fortify our elections ahead of 2024. And so we have to take it upon ourselves. And that's why it's important that all of you are not only engaged as citizen activists and grassroots election integrity activists, but also as citizen journalists. I don't even live in California. And yet, through whistleblowers and my own contact with citizen journalists here in the state of California and people who are grassroots activists in your own party, we were able to blow the whistle and report a story that how come the mainstream media isn't reporting on what California tried to do by changing the rules, right? You'll notice that some of the biggest stories that are breaking in this country today and some of the biggest election scandals are not being reported by the mainstream media. Okay, these are stories that are being broken by people with their cell phone cameras, with their independent blogs, with their social media accounts. Everybody has access to a phone these days, right? And it was Andrew Breitbart who had famously said, right, that it's going to be citizen journalists that overpower the mainstream media, and that's why prior to his death, right, he encouraged people to take matters into their own hands and be citizen journalists to bring truth and light to the people. Talk about this. I think it's really interesting that I ended up being in California this week of all weeks, right? Because you had the GOP debate. How many of you watched the GOP debate? Yeah, we were busy watching Trump, right? The real president. A real candidate for president. But you had the GOP debate in Simi Valley, and then you also had Joe Biden, who just decided to come and meet with the co-founder of Facebook. Did you guys know this? Yeah. He had a private fundraiser in San Francisco with the co-founder of Facebook. I guess they're getting ready to, pick their election rigging techniques ahead of 2024. But then I think the most interesting thing that happened is Gavin Newsom, your governor, right? We all know the secret's out of the bag. He's going to be running for president. It's pretty obvious. How many of you are ready for President Gavin Newsom? Yeah, so, it's obvious what's happening here, right? The Democrats see the writing on the wall, and you have the recent ABC Washington Post poll that shows that President Trump is now over 10 points ahead of Joe Biden. That is what I call polling above the margin of rigging. So now that President Trump is polling above the margin of election rigging, the Democrats are losing their minds because they realize that, we have an Alzheimer's patient sitting in the White House, okay? We all know it. They know it. And it's only going to get worse because you don't recover from that, right? It's a degenerative condition, and Joe Biden gets worse by the day, which is why, of course, they've called in Gavin Newsom now to be their representative, right? Why would you have the governor of California, who is probably the most hated governor, outside of Ron DeSantis, of course, in our country right now, being your campaign representative and your spokesperson at the GOP debate? Why is the governor of California even attending the second GOP presidential debate. Why? Because he's going to be hijacking the media narratives. And that's exactly what happened this week. And it's kind of coincidental, right? Then you have your state senator, Dianne Feinstein, pass away. And how many of you recall what Gavin Newsom said? You know, he actually said, believe it or not, and a lot of people forgot about this, that if Dianne Feinstein's seat ever had to be replaced due to a health crisis or her death, he was only going to appoint a black woman. A black woman. So, I don't know, I guess, what does that mean for our country then, right? I guess if we're playing by the rules of appointing a black woman, I guess that rules out Michelle Obama. But, you know, we'll see, right? Given the fact, never say never, because at the end of the day, the Democrats don't even know what a woman is. So, you know, never say never. But you have Kamala Harris, but let's be honest, I think that I'm blacker than your first so-called black senator or black vice president. She's not really black. I say that because her family owned slaves, believe it or not, right? So it's really interesting how the Democrats like to force these narratives on us, right? And they say things like, well, you know, we have to have a woman as a vice president. We have to only appoint people because who cares about merit anymore, right? Who cares about whether or not you're actually competent or capable or smart enough to do a job? I mean, can you believe that we are actually living in a country where you have the governor of California saying that the next person who's going to fill the Senate seat has to be a black woman? I think it just needs to go to whoever is the most qualified, right? Doesn't necessarily need to be a woman, right? Could be a man. But unfortunately, right, as Bill Whittle was highlighting during his talk, we're living in a culture now where everybody gets a participation trophy, right? We're being governed by adult children. And that is, I think, the most unfortunate thing that's happening in our country today. So we'll see what happens. I don't know what's going to happen with Dianne Feinstein's seat, but it is pretty obvious that the motions are being put into place so that Gavin Newsom can appoint the next senator from the state of California, and I think that he's going to be the Democrat nominee. I think that's what they're looking to do. I don't know if you agree, but I think it's important that all of you, right, start pushing back now, because from my perspective as an investigative journalist and an activist and somebody who does a lot of political reporting, I really do believe that that's what they're looking to do. So California is going to be playing a major role. It already is, right? With the selection of whoever's going to be the GOP nominee. It's going to be Trump, even though, you know, people like, we're going to just have to drag Jessica Patterson kicking and screaming because we know that they don't want him, right? And I keep on mentioning Jessica Patterson because it's so obvious what she's doing. This lady is Kevin McCarthy's lapdog, and she's just being groomed to become the next Ronna Romney. I mean, that's what this woman wants, right? She wants desperately to be the next RNC chairwoman. And so even though it's quite remarkable, California has been completely hijacked by these communist politicians, you guys are at the center of all of the most powerful positions in our country right now. In a 50-50 Senate, right? Who's going to be the Democrat nominee for president? Who's going to be the next potential chairwoman of the RNC? And so I know that at times, right, it's easy to feel helpless and hopeless because as somebody who's been subjected to all types of cancel culture and censorship and had my own elections rigged, and I don't know if you know this, but I was the first candidate in the entire country to be completely deplatformed on all social media. I was the only candidate that wasn't allowed to have a personal account or a campaign account when I ran. And it made all the difference, right? Because otherwise I would be in Congress right now. But I say that because it's easy when you look around and you see these things happening and you're in a border state. I'm originally from Tucson, Arizona. And it just seems so chaotic and so hopeless. But we have to keep on fighting back, right? We have to keep on fighting back. And I think that if anybody embodies what it means to be a fighter and what it means to fight back in the face of adversity and in the face of almost impossible obstacles, it's President Donald Trump. It's President Trump. It's President Trump. And, you know, in the midst of our great American decline, I think it's vastly important that we never forget the successes that we had under President Trump, because we now find ourselves living not just in an age of cancel culture, but also revisionist history. where we're being told that, well, you know, President Trump wasn't that great, or, oh, well, we need Trump without the baggage, right? That's what they like to say about Governor Ron DeSantis, who I think has now effectively committed political suicide, right? I think that we can all agree. But it's really important because if you remember, even under President Obama, he used to chastise and criticize then candidate Trump in 2016 on the campaign trail, especially with regards to the economy. And I really do believe that not only are we living, through some of the most severe and depressing economic times in our country, but if President Trump doesn't get back into the White House, it's not just going to be the death of our American economy, it's going to be the death of America. There's not going to be a country for your children or your grandchildren or even your great-grandchildren to live in. And people need to understand the severity of the situation we're living in because the Republican Party loves to sell people, just like Obama ran on a platform of hope and change, right? People are so obsessed with leaving everything on a positive note. But I didn't come to California to give you a bunch of hopium and copium, right? People need to understand the urgency of the situation that we're in today because it's now or never. And if we all don't unite now behind President Trump and behind, forcing, right, these party officials to get behind President Trump and stop wasting valuable resources, how much money do you think is going to be wasted in this stupid, pointless, ridiculous GOP primary? It's probably going to be about $1 to $1.5 billion by the end of it. Imagine what we could do with $1.5 billion for the sake of fortifying our elections and securing our elections and combating voter fraud. Just imagine what we could do with that type of money. We don't have time anymore. We don't have time anymore to waste. This is it. We have about 1 year to get it right or else this country's over. And I just wish that more people would understand it and think about it in those terms because we are on life support and the plug is going to be pulled in this country in November of 2024 unless President Donald Trump is elected for a third time. So to highlight some of President Trump's accomplishments, right? People often wonder, well, what was President Trump's secret? Some people, they're just so, enthralled with President Trump and his accomplishments. They call him the greatest president ever because he is, right? Yes, and you sometimes think, well, what is it? Does he have a magic wand, right? No, he's a magical person, but he doesn't have a magical wand. What he did is he unleashed the power of the individual and the power of the American people. That's what he did. President Trump cut more regulations than any president in American history. He shredded government intrusion into the private sector, which created an explosion of economic growth. He also cultivated America's domestic energy capabilities, making America a net oil exporter for the first time in 75 years, challenging Saudi Arabia's dominance. A lot of people don't remember that. President Trump cut your taxes. He protected your jobs, and he throttled America's enemies. How many of you remember ISIS? I know now they're coming across our border again, right? Because we're just letting these people in. We're letting all types of terrorists in. But, we don't really hear about ISIS as much anymore because President Trump completely erased them off the face of the map. He took the most feared terrorist organization in the world from a time where we used to, remember what happened in San Bernardino, California? How many of you remember that, the ISIS terrorist attack? How many of you ever imagined that you would have a married couple who, like jihadi lovers from ISIS, who were going to go on a holiday rampage in the name of ISIS? I mean, that's the kind of carnage that was brought to our country under the presidency of Barack Hussein Obama and Joe Biden. And that's what's coming back if we don't get President Trump back into the White House, because he was able to send ISIS straight to hell where they belong. But now that he's been out of office, okay, because of the stolen election, elections have consequences, but stolen elections are lethal. And we're not just we're witnessing it on a daily basis with fentanyl coming across our border. How many hundreds of thousands of Americans are dropping dead every single year because of fentanyl poisoning? How many people, I know there's an angel mom in the audience tonight. I saw her earlier, I put her son's photo on Nancy Pelosi's lawn when I hopped Nancy Pelosi's fence a couple of years ago and pitched a tent and claimed sanctuary. Did the same thing at Gavin Newsom's lawn. But you know, how many more angel moms are we going to have in this country if we don't get President Trump back into the White House? A lot more. You know, when we talk about this coming election and the consequences of the last election, I really do believe that it's our duty as the American people to start taking matters into our own hands. And that's why I've dedicated myself as an investigative journalist completely, right? Over this next year, I've dedicated myself 100% to helping President Trump get reelected because I know how important it is. And every day, you know, I ran for Congress twice. As I said, people ask me, oh, are you going to run again? Are you going to run again? What's the point of anybody running for office in this country if President Trump doesn't get back in? What do you think is going to happen to every single America First or MAGA candidate on the ballot if President Trump is either removed from the ballot, if he's jailed, or if they're able to somehow steal the election again? As President Trump often says, the only thing that's standing in between all of us, okay, and them, as in the DOJ and this corrupt, weaponized government, is him. And if they can get away with jailing a billionaire, the most powerful man in the world, the President of the United States, and the leading GOP candidate for president, what do you think they're going to do to all of you or everybody else who stood up? You already see with these indictments that they have tried to criminalize, saying things like the election was stolen, saying that the election is rigged. How many of you have said publicly that the election was stolen or the election was rigged? Yeah, so, you know, when you look at what they're trying to do to President Trump, they're trying to put a man in his late 70s into jail potentially for upwards of 700 years. I think that we're all going to end up being roommates in the gulag if President Trump doesn't get back into office. And again, it may sound severe, but that's exactly how you have to think of it, because that's exactly what's coming to this country. And a lot of people, they like going about their lives and they don't like thinking about this because it's really negative. And, you know, there's kind of like this whole taboo thing like, oh, you know, don't give such a depressing speech. We don't want everybody to leave so depressed. But there's not a lot to be happy about these days. There really isn't. And people need to understand that there isn't going to be anything salvageable in this country. There's not going to be anything enjoyable for you or your families if President Trump doesn't get back into office. And that's how people need to start thinking about it, because it's that serious. It's that severe. And I don't think it's really hit a lot of people. Maybe they're going to wake up and finally see how severe this is when they watch the trials. Okay, when they start watching these trials that are all conveniently taking place, the week of the Iowa caucus, and, you know, the same exact week of some of the largest primaries, right, in our country, the GOP presidential primaries. When are people going to wake up and understand how serious this is for our country? This is election interference. Yep. Just having a podium. And so, without my work, right, as an investigative journalist, people will say to me, well, why'd you come here today? You don't even live in the state of California, you live in Florida. Because I want to show people, right, how easy it is to do what I do. I'm not funded by any mainstream media. Okay, I used to work for Project Veritas, but I'm just an independent journalist, right, with my own website. I'm supported by grassroots individuals, American patriots, people like you who care about our country. Everybody has information, right? It just depends on what you do with that type of information, whether you hold on to it or whether you decide to take action with that information or whether you decide to leak that information to other investigative journalists and activists so that you too can hold corrupt politicians and people like Jessica Patterson and Kevin McCarthy accountable for their corruption. Right? You can do it too. And so without my work, we would never know that the rhinos in the California GOP were planning on rigging the delegate count in the Republican primary to award a participation trophy to Ron DeSantis, Nikki Haley, and the rest of the pathetic GOP establishment candidates in the race. And though your state may seem insignificant in the eyes of national politics because of the Democrat domination of the state, as I mentioned before, it's really important that people understand this, right?
California is the state with the highest number of Republican delegates at the GOP convention to nominate the Republican candidate for president of the United States. And so all of you clearly understand that you wouldn't be spending your weekend attending a political conference unless you were, very politically motivated individuals. But I often hear so many times, I meet people traveling around the country giving talks. I have a lot of followers from all around the world, and a lot of people message me and they say, well, what's the point? I'm not going to vote anymore. I'm not going to get involved. I live in California. They've conquered it, right? They've conquered it. No, you have to stay where you are, and you have to fight and reclaim what was taken from you. You have to stay where you are, and you have to educate others, and you have to tell people not to give up. And it was President Trump who once said, never, ever give up, right? And I think that we can learn a lot from President Trump, a man who has been so viciously persecuted, a man who is prosecuted every single day. I mean, it's ridiculous. I used to live in Palm Beach County. I lived right down the road from Mar-a-Lago, okay? I used to live in these condos. I didn't own the condo, but the condos next door to me, okay? These are condos, 3-bedroom condos worth $7 million with an ocean view. 2 miles away up the road is Mar-a-Lago. They want you to actually believe that you can have a condo on the beach for $7 million and that Mar-a-Lago is only worth $18 million. I mean, are you kidding me? Why do I bring this up, right? Because it hasn't ended, right? They got what they wanted. They were able to steal the election from President Trump. They were able to weaponize government against him. They were able to manufacture lies with Crossfire Hurricane and divide our country with lies by weaponizing the FBI, weaponizing our government. But
get the fuck out of here! Boo! Leave!
But
leave! Trump! 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 Trump!
But it hasn't ended. It hasn't ended, right? It hasn't ended because their plan isn't just to eliminate President Trump. Their plan isn't just to destroy our country and to give Joe Biden or Gavin Newsom, right, whoever it may be in 2024, another 4 years. Okay, their plan is to destroy you. And I think that it's very important as motivated and engaged conservative activists that we realize that, our loyalty isn't to the Republican Party. Our loyalty is to the United States of America as patriots. And so I know that I'm in California, the state of where Ronald Reagan is from, but I'm going to say that I think one of the most cancerous and toxic things that has ever happened to the Republican Party is Ronald Reagan's 11th commandment, where he says that Republicans shall not speak ill of other Republicans. I think that it is long past the time that we start naming and shaming all of the rhinos in the Republican Party that are working hand in hand with the Democrats to destroy our country. Because the theft of the election, right, it doesn't just highlight the importance of the need for election integrity efforts, but it also highlights the true enemy that we face. And I truly believe, the bottom of my heart, that our main enemy isn't just the Democrat Party, but it's the obstructionist Republicans and the Republican Party who helped the Democrats steal the election from President Trump in 2020. Let's be honest, Joe Biden never would have taken the oath of office if the weak, pathetic, and embarrassing establishment Republicans had the balls to take a stand. They refused to take a stand, not just for Donald Trump, but for all of you and the people of this nation. The Democrats are only as evil as the Republican establishment allows them to be, as we saw today with their fecklessness and the cowardice of the Republicans who, once again, even though we have control of the House, allowed for the Democrats to win. Right? It's incredible. Even when we supposedly have power, the Republicans are incapable of taking the ball across the field and scoring a touchdown. It's pathetic. Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy have allowed people like Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and Joe Biden to slice this country into a million pieces. And now it's our job as the American people to try to put the pieces back together. It's time for the people of this nation to leave behind the days of bliss, to forget the careless lives that we were once permitted to live, because we are never going back to how things used to be, ever. The damage has been done. And unfortunately, right, so many people like to say that we will be able to go back to how this country's been. We're not. We are never going back to how things used to be in this country. It's now a difference between accelerationism and absolute rapid decline, or a slow burning candle. Are we going to be able to slow the destruction in America? And I do believe that's the difference between 4 more years of a Democrat presidency and somebody like Donald Trump, who will be able to help us at least reverse the speed of the burn, okay? Because we need to inspire other leaders as well. President Trump isn't going to be around forever. He'll win. I do believe that he'll win, and he'll be in office for another 4 years, and then what? And then what? Who is going to pick up the torch? Because when you look around, right, we don't really have a lot of inspiring leaders in our Republican Party. When you look around in Congress, you see that a lot of these people are just members of what I like to call the Congressional Celebrity Caucus. They like to go on Fox News and give their tough little sound bites, and then they go on Twitter and they act real tough in the hearings and they make all these promises. But where's the motion to vacate for Kevin McCarthy? Where is it? You know, you saw people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz talk a big talk, but what did they do? They completely betrayed us and let us down today. Who in the Republican Party actually stood their ground today? You had Byron Donalds actually admit to forgetting about the vote. So where are our conservative leaders? And if these are the people who are currently serving in Congress, who President Trump has to count on in order to help secure his victory, then we're in trouble. We're in a lot of trouble. We cannot wait for these feckless cowards and big talkers, okay, these wannabe celebrities in Congress to come and save us. We can't count on them, and we saw that today. And so I can't reiterate to you enough times how important it is that we pick up the ball, okay, and carry it across the finish lines ourselves. If we want to see President Trump get back into office, if we want to save our country, then we have to do it on our own. Because the Republican Party has failed us time and time again, and they are not coming to save us. Last page. And so for all of these reasons, I have not only just endorsed President Trump. You know, I love President Trump. I'd say that I'm probably his biggest supporter, but, I probably have to fight some of you for that title, right? I think we all think we're his biggest supporters, right? But I haven't just endorsed President Trump for re-election, but I'm here today, and I traveled all the way from Florida to ask all of you and everybody that I encountered this weekend during my time in California this week to join me and to take a pledge tonight, okay, to put your full support behind President Trump so that we can get the greatest president this country has ever seen re-elected again. In 2024, it's pretty obvious that the choice is clear. If you want security and prosperity and change as opposed to more hopium and copium and empty and broken promises, then President Trump is your candidate. If you are tired of seeing your hard-earned money go to the government, then President Trump is your candidate. If you are tired of watching the American people, American citizens, people who are actually following law and order get replaced by criminal, illegal, alien invaders, and you are tired of having your state and your country overrun by millions of illegal aliens, then President Trump is your candidate. If you want to see an end to the violence in our streets and our two-tier justice system and the weaponization of government that threatens the lives of every single American and the future of what it means to live in a free America, then President Trump is your candidate. Our goal together is very simple. We will make America safe again. We will make America rich again. We will make America prosperous again. And we will make America free again. But only if President Donald Trump is reelected. Thank you.
Loomer! 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 Loomer!
Thank you so much. Okay, that's fine. Thank you. God, I got to bring some of you to my speeches. You were so good at getting rid of those hecklers. My God, I've got to bring some of you next time I travel. So I think we have time for a couple questions, if we have a few questions. Yeah.
A few weeks ago, you had a little encounter on a bridge.
Oh, yeah.
With some people with flags. You want to...
Yeah, it's never a dull moment. Even when I just try to go, spend a Saturday getting my hair colored. I was leaving the hair salon and I encountered, it was really interesting. It was like 50 men who were waving these swastika flags, actual Nazis, on the highway in Florida. And so I thought to myself, this is very strange. And oftentimes we see these as political psyops, right? And then the media likes to show people waving Nazi flags and they say, see, look what President Trump did. Look at all these Nazis and white supremacists. So I decided that I was going to pull over and go talk to these Nazis. And it turns out that they were actually Joe Biden supporters. And they actually told me that they support Joe Biden as opposed to President Trump because Joe Biden keeps on sending money overseas to Ukraine. And a lot of people don't know this, but our taxpayer money is being used to fund Ukrainian Nazi death squads and groups like Azov Battalion. So, of course, the media doesn't want to talk about it, but it ended up leading to this whole investigation that I conducted in which one of these neo-Nazis had actually been arrested for terrorism, actual Nazi white supremacist terrorism in the state of Florida years ago. And since then, he's been recruited by the CIA to be a federal informant. And so, that's what's happening in our country. And they say that we're crazy if we say that these instigators are feds, right? We see what they did on January 6th and how they tried to set people up and they had their own little federal informants there trying to lead people inside the Capitol. But this is what's happening in our country. You can't trust the FBI anymore. You can't trust the DOJ. You cannot trust your own elected officials to tell the truth because they have weaponized government against you. And they are actually working with real Nazis and real domestic terrorists to frame conservative Americans.
Laura, thank you for giving my son a voice. What can we do to prevent more families to having to bury their children at the hands killed by illegal aliens like my own son? Thank you for giving him a voice.
Yeah.
What can we do?
Oh, she said thank you for giving her son a voice. She's an angel mom. Her son, unfortunately, Ronald Silva, was murdered several years ago, her only son, by an illegal alien. And when I went to Nancy Pelosi's house and Gavin Newsom's house, I had a tent and I actually brought real illegal aliens during the last government shutdown to really see if these Democrats in California were as hospitable as they claim to be. They always say everyone's welcome here, but it turns out when you pitch a tent on their own multi-million-dollar lawns, you get deported. If only they did the same to the 50 million illegals in our country. But she asked, how can we prevent other parents like herself from having to bury their kids who are murdered or killed by illegal aliens? And the answer is simple. You have to vote for President Trump. Because President Trump is the only candidate right now who has agreed to militarize our border, to shoot drug dealers on site, to mass deport all of these illegal aliens and to keep these terrorists and to keep these criminal illegal aliens out of our country. I couldn't believe it while watching the debate this last week. Mike Pence actually had the audacity to say that he's the guy who implemented Remain in Mexico. I mean, like I said before in my speech, we're literally living through a time of revisionist history. They're trying to rewrite history, and it's up to all of us to highlight, the many accomplishments that I just read to you tonight of President Trump and his administration, because while they're trying to jail President Trump, they're also trying to completely rewrite facts about his term as president. They're just lying. You see Fox News. They just lie on a daily basis. You have Rupert Murdoch, the head of Fox News, who invited Ron DeSantis out, to his ranch in California and said that they were going to put the entire News Corp empire behind him. Well, what does that mean? Fox News, the New York Post, Wall Street Journal, HarperCollins Publishing. That's the book company that gave Ron DeSantis his book deal. And why am I mentioning this to you? Because they control the media. And if you control the media, you control the flow of information, and they are trying to brainwash people and push revisionist history so that you think that President Trump didn't accomplish anything and that he didn't secure the border and that he didn't help angel moms. President Trump was the first president to ever use the term angel mom and the first and only president in this country to invite angel moms and families to the White House, where he honored them and actually invited them to participate in panel discussions with his advisors and officials from DHS and Homeland Security on how to improve the illegal immigration crisis in our country. So you have to vote for Trump. That's all of the solutions to our problems. The answer is vote for President Trump. Yes.
So when President Trump gets elected or re-elected, I guess he's still got a lot of cultural problems. We have the religion of global warming.
Yeah.
We have, men can become women.
Right.
We have all these screwball ideas that are infiltrating our society. We're a racist country. How are we going to get rid of that stuff? How are we going to deal with it?
You're never going to get rid of it, unfortunately, but I think it makes a big difference as who's in charge, right, and who is leading our country and leading the messaging, right, from the podium in the White House right now. You have Marxists and communists, people who stole the election, pushing this, ridiculous agenda of global warming, as you said, pushing this narrative that it's okay to have men and women's sports, and that we don't know what a woman is anymore, and that you can be called a birthing person. We need people who have common sense back in the White House. And so you're always going to have transgender people. You're always going to have people in this country that believe in global warming. You're never going to completely eradicate those ideas. But I think that it does a lot for our country depending on who's in charge, right, and who's controlling the flow of information. And that's unfortunately why you see this distortion of reality and revisionist history, because the people in charge are working with the biggest distributors of information, the people who control the big tech social media companies. And that's not a conspiracy theory, right? We recently saw the court documents that came out from the lawsuit that was filed, I believe, in Missouri against the big tech social media companies and the Biden administration. And they admitted, even the judge found the Biden administration in violation of people's First Amendment rights because they were giving orders to the big tech social media companies on what you are allowed to believe and what you're not allowed to believe. So we have to get President Trump back into office. And a lot of that has a lot to do with breaking up big tech. And President Trump has already said publicly that he believes in repealing Section 230, which is what allows for these companies to have their immunity in the courts so that they can be the purveyors of truth and information. Yep.
One more question.
Right here.
What do we do about the voting machines that can change our votes and the counting machines that can change our votes?
Well, that's a good question. She asked, what can we do about the voting machines that can rig our elections and our votes? Well, look, unfortunately, right, we have election month in this country. We don't have election day, and until we have election day and election reform, we have to operate within the rules, right? We have to try to beat the Democrats at their own rule books. So we have to engage in early voting. We have to encourage people who are not going to be able to vote in person to submit an absentee ballot, right? Until we are able to actually get President Trump back into office and encourage, something like a national election day as opposed to election month. I think that it's important that we keep on converting people and reminding people and using our voices to get people to support President Trump and to spread this message of urgency, because, like I said, he's now polling above the margin of rigging, okay? So we just got to keep those trend lines up, because the more people we wake up about this, the harder it's going to be for them to make up all of these ballots that come in for President Trump on election night. Yeah, great. Well, thank you. And I appreciate it. If anybody wants to follow me, I'm still banned on all these social media sites, but I'm back on Twitter at Laura Loomer. And my website is loomered.com. And then I'm also on Substack and Rumble. My Substack is lauraloomer.substack.com. And then my Rumble channel is just Laura Loomer. And that's where you can follow me and get all my updates. So thank you for having me tonight.
Take donations on your website.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
All right, big hand for Laura Loomer, please. Can we get Laura Wallace to come up for a moment? Laura, and remember,